Hey friends, welcome back to another pottery tutorial. It's been sort of a long time since I've last uploaded anything. Germany went back into lockdown, so our studio is closed. You would think that that would give me more time to do things like this, but yeah, unfortunately. And I also took some time off for the holidays, but I'm super happy to be back here today filming another video. Today was another request from you guys, so we're going to be doing slab building today, and we're going to be making a slab mug. Let's get started. The tools you will need for this project is first a work surface. I will be using, as always, a wedging board. Check out the video link down below to how you can build one of these yourself. You will also need a rolling pin, 2 thickness gauges, mine are 1/2 centimeter, a ruler, a knife, a paintbrush, a scoring tool. You can also use a needle tool or a fork for this, a rib, some slip, and of course, some clay. So I will, as always, be using a stoneware clay. This happens to be a speckled stoneware. So as you can imagine with slab building, we'll start by rolling out a slab. If you are using recycled clay like I am, and you also didn't wedge like I didn't, you might end up with a few bubbles in your clay, in your slab. Just be sure to poke those and deflate the bubbles before you keep working. As always with slabs, you want to use your rib to compress the clay. This will make the clay stronger and also take care of any texture problems. Okay, now we have our rather funny shaped slab. Looks like a tree. So I'm going to make sort of a small, like a mini mug. Lately I've been really digging these kind of miniature mugs that are just like 1-finger mug, and you can put like an espresso or like a small tea inside of it. I think they're super cute and really fun, but of course this can be sized up to however big you want. So I'm going to use my ruler now, and I'm going to take this strip here because it's the longest. And I'll just start by cutting one straight line. And this extra, I'm going to keep for later. So now I'm going to cut this into a perfect rectangle. So I think I'm going to go for 9 centimeters tall, which means I will have a cup in the end about 8 centimeters tall. A nice mini mug. So I simply hold the ruler down and measure out 9 centimeters, mark it with my knife, and cut. Okay, and now I like to just eyeball this because I'm kind of lazy. So I'll just cut more or less 90 degrees. It's clay, so you don't have to be so precise. Alright, so we have our rectangle, and then if we can put it together, we can sort of start to visualize how our mug will look. So it will be more or less these dimensions. And now we need to go about attaching these two sides. So I'm going to hold my knife at a 45-degree angle and cut a bevel on the edge here. So you can see perhaps how it's starting to taper. Yeah? And now it's very important to flip this over and cut on the same side, the same bevel. I mean, it's the other side, but you flipped it, so I'm still cutting on my right. And then you should have it so that the 2 pieces of clay overlap. And then you can make a seam, but without adding extra thickness to your clay. You can leave the ends flat and then just overlap the clay like that. Some people think that adds a cool aesthetic touch, but in this case, I just want the seam to disappear. So now I'm going to lay it back down, and now I'm going to do my slipping and scoring. So as always, you start with scoring first. I'm going to scratch the clay both directions. So if you don't have this fancy tool here, you can use a needle tool or you can use a fork. Now I'm going to use my slip. So slip is just dried clay dissolved in water, so it started to break down. I just put this in here about 10 minutes ago before I started filming. When the clay is dry, it's going to dissolve really quickly. If you put wet clay in, you'll have to leave it for, I don't know, maybe a day or so. So it always helps to have a little bit of dry clay around so you can mix up a batch of slip. I'm just going to apply it to both sides. And now, put the two sides together and I'll squeeze. Helps to have a rag or a towel nearby. Now your seam is going to look really ugly in the beginning. It's going to be very obvious and very sloppy looking. Don't worry about that. You'll need to let the seam sit for a little bit so it can sort of dry off and really connect before you can go about cleaning it up. So right now we're just working on making sure that we have a nice strong seam there, that the two sides start binding together. So I always want to let this sit for about, I don't know, 5-10 minutes before I do the actual cleaning up. I'm going to do a lot more cleaning up than I just did now, but I do want to take a moment to let the slip dry out a little bit. So I'm going to let this soak, and in the meantime I can make the bottom of the mug. So I'm going to use my extra clay that I saved, maybe cut it separate from this big chunk here. So I want to make the bottom of the mug round, so I'm going to just look down from the top to try and get this slab wall as round as I can. I don't care about the top, I'm just looking straight down at the bottom to try and squidge it all into about as round as I want to be. So now it's very important, I'm not going to cut out this bottom yet. I'm just going to trace with my knife, or you can use a needle tool or maybe a pencil, around where it's attaching, but I'm not cutting the clay. I lift it off, flip it over, and now you can see, look, I've drawn it only. I'm going to take my scoring tool and I'm going to scratch on the inside of that ring that I just drew, because this is where our walls are going to attach to the bottom. So I can prepare the bottom while I'm waiting for the walls to dry up. So I just scored around in a ring, and then I'm going to scratch the other way. It's always good to score in two directions. If you happen to have a dog like I do and you get like little dog hairs always in your clay, don't worry about that. I used to be so anal about removing the dog hairs from the clay. It just burns out. I've never noticed any problems with that. A lot of material burns out of the clay when it goes into the bisque. So the dog hair is just adding to that. It's not going to cause any problems. Okay, and now, before I attach these, it's been a couple minutes, the slip has started to darken in color, which means it started to dry. And so now I can take the time to kind of smooth this transition. I'm taking my thumb, I'm just dragging it across. It's still not perfect, but of course I'm going to go over the whole mug in the end again, so it's gonna be fine. So now I want to attach these two together. So again, I'm gonna score both sides that I want to attach together. So in this case, I'm gonna score the bottom of this cup. Now I'm going to attach them together. So again, I'm looking down through here and along the sides to make sure that they match up. And instead of pushing straight down, I'm going to kind of push gently with my hands on it, and I'm going to twist it down. So it starts to capture, it starts to grab at each other, just like Velcro. And I like to flip it over. Where's my rib? And give a few pats with the rib. All right, now I'm still not gonna cut it off yet. I want to give this a few moments to dry out before I do so. So now I'll be back in about 5 minutes. So after about 5 minutes, you can cut off the bottom. Now when I cut the bottom, I'm going to put my knife straight down from the wall of the cup. This ensures that I have a continuous line from the wall to the bottom. You can of course cut at an angle if you want to. That will add a different detail to your cup. Now I have cut up my bottom, and I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to push the bottom into the walls to try and get rid of that line there. Okay, so now I have the shape of my mug. Now I can still change it quite a bit if I want to. Clay is still quite plastic, so I can shape it as I wish. I mean, not too much, of course, but let's see what we can do here. So I'm thinking about pushing out this middle part a little bit. So I'm gonna push from the inside and try and fatten up that inner part a little bit. I'm wiping it with my outside finger while I do it to try and smooth out any cracks that are appearing as I push it out. This clay tends to crack very easily, but if this clay can handle it, your clay will be able to. So I just went up now a step, and I'm going to go around once more. So I'm starting from the bottom and I'm going to work my way up. Some people like to use a spoon for this, so they'll use a spoon on the inside to kind of make it, spoons help keep it like a lot more regular of a curve. I'm gonna try with my hand. Let's see what happens. And likewise, I can compress the clay. If I push the clay into itself, the diameter will get smaller. So you can see we got a little bit of shaping going on. Don't want to ever make the rim too narrow on these things, because then when you drink out of it, it's gonna bump into your nose. So maybe I'm going to flare it again a little bit at the top. So I'm gonna bring that compression down a little bit to try and show the contrast between the slight roundedness and the slight compressedness of this slab mug. And then when I've got that all sort of brought in, I can just turn the rim out a touch. Watch the cracking. Make sure you smooth that over. Don't add water when your clay starts to crack unless it's no longer smoothing when you just use your finger on the clay. Usually the wetness of the clay, as long as your clay is fresh enough, the wetness of the clay is enough to smooth out the cracking. Don't forget that water weakens your clay. So only add it if it's really necessary, especially with slab building. You want to keep the structural integrity of the clay by keeping it dry enough. So I think this is a cute little mug. Very different than what I normally make, but of course I would normally make something like this on the wheel. And I kind of like he's kind of like a little bit of a fat foot too. Maybe we can emphasize that a little bit by drawing my finger around the bottom. No, I'm just having fun. What if I'm really just freestyling. This is fun. Kind of thought it would look like a flower a bit, but not really. It looks like something interesting though. I'm really pushing the clay to its limits though right now. It's very much cracking. So I think I'm gonna quit on the shaping. And we'll see what a handle can do to this, guys, because it's not a mug without a handle, y'all. It's just a tumbler then. If you wanted to, you could cut the rim to be more flat, but I'd prefer a more organic rim. Okay, so now we have a few options here for handles. So of course I've got this extra clay here. So I can cut out something with this. Let's see how it looks. I can do something like this, but I think this mug is starting to look a little bit like beefy, like wants to be a strong mug. So I'm gonna make a thicker handle than this. So if you wanted to attach this, you would just slip and score the 2 points where it will connect. I'll show you a different handle and then I'll show you the connection of that handle, and that handle will be, the way you attach it is exactly the same as you would attach a handle like this. So I'm gonna get some new clay for that. So I'm going to make a coil handle, but I'm gonna shape it a little bit too. So I'm gonna start with rolling out a coil. I'm gonna try and keep it a little thicker at one end. Or should I? No, let's do thick at both ends and then thin in the middle. See how that looks. It's kind of how I do my throne mugs as well. Mostly focusing on the center because I want to keep these two sides fat. And when you want a dog bone mug shape, you have to keep rotating it. So you see I'm rotating. So I get the different sides, because if you just roll on one side, it will be uneven. Let's just say that. Try it and you'll see what I mean. I learned that from, what's her name? Oh, Good Elephant Pottery. She also makes amazing online classes. Really cool lady, very impressive. I hope someday I'm such a badass with clay. This ended up not being a mini mug after all. Gonna be kind of like a strong man mug. Actually, I like those types of mugs best. Okay, so now it's time to attach it. And so just like the slab handle, I'm going to set it on exactly where it's meant to be. I like to support it with my thumb while I'm doing it so I have my right hand free. And I'm going to make a few reference points where it's going to attach. So I'm just using my knife again to just draw a few reference points so I know where to score. And then I'll use my scoring tool again to scrape, scrape, scrape. And slip. When you're working with fresh clay like you will with hand building, we don't need to use much slip. Sometimes I just score both sides and stick it together, depending on what I'm making. You'll sort of get a feel for it eventually. And when you're hand building too, the pieces tend to dry out as you're handling them because your hands are absorbing water. So you might need to use slip, you might not, depending on how fast you're working and a few other factors, of course. Okay, so I slipped both sides, I scored both sides, and now I'm going to stick my hand inside the mug and I'm going to line it up. And I'm going to focus on the top first. So I'm going to have my inside hand right behind where the handle is attaching to support it, because I'm going to be pushing with this hand with quite a lot of pressure. Pushing it so it attaches. What you want to see is the slip kind of squeezing out like that. That's what we want. Once again, it's going to look ugly before it looks beautiful. So let it look ugly for a minute. And squish this side. Great, awesome, I kind of love this. So, once again, you always want to let it dry out before you start cleaning it up. So I'm going to wait another 5 minutes so it can dry out. Okay, so now it's been sitting for 5 minutes or so. Now I'm going to clean up the handle, and for this I'm going to use my paintbrush, and I'll just smooth it out there and remove any of the extra slip. Be careful not to add too much water with your paintbrush. I actually just wiped it off on a rag. I'm going to actually be removing the extra slip and not trying to blend it in, because that's just extra anyway. Your handle should be well attached at this point. Not enough to grab it by the handle, but well enough that it will stick in the long run. Another thing I usually do with slab mugs is I will take my paintbrush and kind of go along the inside seam too, because there's usually a little bit of extra slip down there. You can use your paintbrush to get where your finger can't to smooth things out. And last but not least, I will just have an overall look on the piece, smoothing out any additional cracks or bits that just seem a little odd. That always takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth your time. Last but not least, you want to sign it. You can use a pencil for that. Last pot of 2020, I guess. Cool. Tomorrow's New Year's. Hey friends, it is now 2021. Happy New Year. It's been about 2 weeks since I last filmed this video. I've since bisqued the pot and glazed it and fired it again to 1250, and I want to show you the result. So that'll be it for this video. I hope that was helpful for you. I would love to see the projects that you make with these tutorials. So you can tag me over at Instagram at Pottery to the People, and please comment down below if there's any other projects you would like me to try. All right, see you next time, guys. Bye.